In the serene setting of Middlesbrough, England, a picturesque town, the illusion of an ideal marriage masked a grim and malevolent truth. Enter the narrative of Jessica Patel and Mitesh Patel, a saga intertwining love, treachery, and a sorrowful crime that would plunge the community into a state of disbelief and shock. Jessica, a devoted pharmacist renowned for her compassion and work ethic, and Mitesh, her spouse, projected an image of contentment and stability in their shared life. However, beneath the veneer of marital bliss lurked undisclosed conflicts and a complex network of deception that would ultimately lead to a harrowing act of violence. Jessica Patel, the eldest child of Jai Patel, entered the world on 16th September 1983 in Leeds, a town nestled in the historic region of West Yorkshire. She was raised in a traditional Desi extended family of 12 members. Despite their modest middle-class lifestyle, the family shared a deep bond of love. Divya Patel, her sister, fondly recalls Jessica as a lively and humorous individual. From a tender age, Jessica displayed nurturing qualities and harbored dreams of pursuing a career as a pharmacologist. Mitesh Patel, who was 3 years older than Jessica, shared the same pharmacology course with her at Montfort University. Their initial connection stemmed from encounters at community gatherings where their similar backgrounds and mutual understanding sparked a blossoming romance. Mitesh portrayed an ideal image of a partner, surprising Jessica with romantic gestures and adorable gifts. However, their relationship faced a hurdle when Jessica's mother received a devastating diagnosis of terminal cancer. Jessica understandably chose to be with her mother during her final moments, causing a strain on her relationship with Mitesh. Following the loss of Jessica's mother, Mitesh took on a supportive role, reigniting their bond. They nurtured their relationship and found themselves deeply in love with each other. Jessica expressed her desire to marry Mitesh, a sentiment he reciprocated wholeheartedly. Their mutual affection and shared dream of marriage encapsulated the essence of young love. After completing her pharmaceutical sciences degree at Montfort University, Jessica secured a place at the esteemed Manchester University for a master's program in pharmacology. Coincidentally, her boyfriend Mitesh was also studying at the same university in the final year of the same degree. They found themselves deeply in love, sharing the same city, university, career path, community, and religion, a seemingly perfect Desi match. However, when Mitesh sought Jessica's father's approval for their marriage, he faced a direct refusal. The family believed it was too early, but Jessica managed to convince them otherwise, emphasizing Mitesh and his family's strong Hindu beliefs that urged them not to delay. Despite initial objections, Jessica's father eventually relented under her persistent requests and reluctantly gave his consent. Their union culminated in a grand Indian wedding attended by 500 guests, leaving Jessica overjoyed. The extravagant ceremony took place in the garden of Jessica's family residence in Leeds, setting the stage for what seemed like a perfect beginning to their shared life. However, beneath the facade of marital bliss, Mitesh harbored a dark secret, leading a double life and engaging in covert encounters with men on Grindr unbeknownst to his new wife. The marriage served as a facade to conceal his authentic sexual orientation from his devout parents and the broader Hindu community. In less than a year, Jessica's family began to detect fissures within the relationship. She confided in her sisters about feeling neglected by Mitesh, highlighting how his once attentive demeanor waned shortly after their nuptials. Gayatri Patel, Jessica's cousin, recalled, "She mentioned that they had not had a sexual relationship for 10 months. That came as a shock, and at the same time, Mitesh became controlling." During her grandfather's palliative care in February 2010, Jessica, who shared a close bond with him, made infrequent visits while the family maintained a bedside vigil. Minal, her sister, recounted Jessica's distress, revealing, "Mitesh forbade her from staying with her grandfather. She expressed, 'Mitesh won't let me stay.' She said they got into an argument in the car over it, and he hit her." Jessica also divulged instances of him throttling her and maintaining an air of secrecy. Minal added, if he was on the phone when she walked into the room to go to bed, he would walk out and continue the conversation in one of their loft rooms upstairs, and that he wouldn't come back down to bed sometimes until 4 a.m. After being married for just 2 years, Mitesh embarked on a heated affair with Dr. Amit Patel, whom he had met through Grindr. Shockingly, Mitesh brazenly invited his lover to stay with them, passing him off as a mere friend. Despite this betrayal, Mitesh and Jessica eventually realized another shared aspiration a few years into their marriage, becoming pharmacy owners. Transitioning from Leeds to Linthorpe, a city located 66 miles away, they acquired the Roman Road Pharmacy on Roman Road. Through dedication and hard work, they transformed the pharmacy into a thriving establishment, not only achieving business success, but also establishing it as a cornerstone of the local community. Their journey to entrepreneurship also saw them purchase a residence in an upscale area of Linthorpe, becoming proud homeowners. Over time, both Mitesh and Jessica earned the admiration of the community, solidifying their positions as respected and beloved contributors to the quaint rural town of Linthorpe. In a bid to salvage their marriage, Jessica viewed the relocation as a new beginning, while Mitesh persisted in his relationship with Amit and maintained his presence on gay dating platforms. The couple faced mounting pressure to start a family, eventually leading Jessica to agree to attempt IVF after enduring 6 years of a sexless union. Unbeknownst to Jessica, Mitesh harbored chilling intentions of utilizing her embryos to establish a family with his lover. In a disturbing turn of events, Mitesh messaged Amit about Jessica's IVF procedure, inquiring, "Will you stand by me?" Amit's response was nonchalant, stating, "She might not even get pregnant. We will deal with it when it happens." Mitesh also insinuated that Jessica would no longer hinder their plans, hinting at her premature departure with the words, "If she went earlier than you think." In 2016, as Amit relocated to Australia, Mitesh's aspirations for a fresh life with his partner in the land down under began to take shape. Sending a text to his lover, he ominously wrote, "I'm telling you, her days are marked." The journey was an emotional roller coaster for Jessica, who endured the heartbreak and strain of 3 rounds of IVF within a span of 2 years. Recounting the arduous process, her sister Minal shared, "After each failed attempt, Jessica told me, 'I can't do this, it's too painful.' Her mental health suffered. It was quite a struggle. She suffered from anxiety and had regular panic attacks." On May 9, 2018, Jessica embarked on the 4th IVF cycle, which proved successful. The couple received the news of 3 fertilized embryos scheduled for implantation the ensuing month. Just 4 days post the positive revelation, Jessica visited her family, brimming with excitement. Minal recalled, "She was absolutely ecstatic. The chances of becoming a mother was finally on her, and her dreams were coming true." Tragically, a mere day later, her joy was abruptly extinguished. On the night of May 14, 2018, Jessica returned home around 7:10 p.m. after working late at the pharmacy. As she entered, Mitesh attacked her, forcing a Tesco bag over her head to suffocate her before strangling her and breaking the bones in her voice box. Jessica fought back, scratching his neck, but within 20 minutes, he had taken her life. Mitesh then bound her feet and hands with duct tape and ransacked the house to stage a robbery. Afterward, he drove to a local pizza restaurant and texted his wife's phone, pretending to be picking up an order. CCTV footage from the restaurant showed him chatting amiably with the staff while his wife lay dead in their living room. At 8:22 p.m., Mitesh called 911 from the couple's home and reported to the emergency operator that they believed their residence had been burgled and that his wife had been assaulted. He provided the address as number 35, the avenue in Middlesbrough, Linthorpe. When questioned about his wife's current location, Mitesh confirmed she was at the same address. He explained that upon returning home from being out, where he had gone to eat, visit colleagues at work, and retrieve his laptop, he found the house in disarray with his wife lying on the floor, unconscious and bound with duct tape. The conversation persisted as the operator endeavored to pacify Mitesh while extracting further details about the dire circumstances. Mitesh narrated the scene within the house, elaborating on Jessica's condition with duct tape restraining her and rendering her unconscious. Urged by the operator, Mitesh recounted the gravity of Jessica's breathing distress. Upon confirming her inability to breathe, the operator provided reassurance of imminent assistance. The call concluded with Mitesh's desperate pleas for Jessica to regain consciousness and his request for the operator to notify his father-in-law about the unfolding tragedy. Tragically, Jessica was declared deceased at the scene, leaving Mitesh shattered. Despite their 12-year bond and seemingly idyllic life, she was abruptly snatched away from him. After swiftly securing the residence and commencing evidence collection, the police initially treated the incident as a botched burglary. Mitesh, along with Jai and other family members, willingly provided their statements to law enforcement. Surprisingly, even the family remained unsuspecting, offering solace to Mitesh just 48 hours following the tragedy during a house visit. Recalling the moment, Jessica's sister Meenal recounted, "I walked straight up to him, sat down on the sofa, and went to hug him. He immediately buried his head in my shoulder. At that point, I thought he was genuinely crying." Jessica's father, Jay, remarked, "Why would somebody do this? Jessica was not the sort of person who would confront anybody. But not for one moment was I thinking Mitesh could have done this. I was comforting him. I held his hand. He let me do all that." Despite these interactions, the autopsy results disclosed that Jessica's cause of death was asphyxiation, indicating oxygen deprivation in her bloodstream. The presence of neck injuries confirmed she had been strangled. The initial suspicion arose from a potential burglary scenario, indicated by the disorderly state of the house when Mitesh contacted emergency services. Nevertheless, the absence of forced entry indications prompted concerns. It became apparent that the scene of the crime had been manipulated to mimic a burglary, deflecting attention from the true perpetrator. Law enforcement promptly cordoned off the premises and initiated the gathering of evidence. CCTV footage played a critical role in outlining the sequence of events. Recorded on camera, Mitesh was seen briefly leaving the house to retrieve his laptop and purchase pizza, establishing a 40-minute time frame within which the crime might have occurred. Upon further scrutiny of the CCTV footage and digital evidence, significant disparities in Mitesh's recollection of events emerged. Investigators uncovered that Jessica had arrived home 40 minutes before Mitesh departed, suggesting that they were both in the residence together during that time frame. This contradicted Mitesh's assertion of discovering Jessica unconscious and bound upon his return. Additionally, the police gained access to data from the Apple Health app on the couple's Apple Watches. This data furnished crucial insights into their heart rates and movements at the time of the incident. Analysis revealed a sudden spike in Jessica's heart rate upon her arrival home, followed by a cessation of her pulse. These findings indicated that she had passed away while Mitesh was present in the house. Furthermore, Mitesh's Apple Health app data exhibited erratic movements within the residence following the cessation of Jessica's heart rate. These actions correlated with the staged burglary setup, implying that Mitesh was attempting to fabricate the presence of an intruder and conceal his role in the incident. The forensic examination of the crime scene revealed compelling evidence against Mitesh. His DNA was detected beneath Jessica's fingernails, indicating a physical altercation, and on the plastic bag utilized to asphyxiate her. While he tried to justify the presence of his DNA by stating that he touched her face to remove the tape, the sole presence of his DNA on the bag contradicted his explanation. Furthermore, investigators discovered that Mitesh had conducted internet searches related to staging a burglary and killing a spouse, dating back to 2012. This revealed a premeditated intent to commit the crime and demonstrated that Mitesh had been planning Jessica's murder for a significant period. On May 17, 2018, 4 days after the murder, an arrest was made and the suspect was taken into police custody. It was a man, a 37-year-old man. It was Jessica Patel's husband, Mitesh Patel. As the evidence unfolded, the extent of Mitesh Patel's deceit and manipulation emerged with striking clarity. The family was left in disbelief as they grappled with the revelations, further shocked during the trial as details of Mitesh's illicit relationships, his involvement with Amit, and his elaborate scheme to abscond with the embryos came to light. Reflecting on the trial, Jessica's sister Meenal expressed, "95% of what was said was a complete shock to us. While there is no indication that his partner anticipated Mitesh's violent act, unsettling text messages presented in court included one chilling message to Amit that starkly stated, 'Her days are numbered.' Mitesh used Jessica as a means to hide his homosexuality and conform to societal expectations within their conservative community. Growing up in a traditional household, Mitesh was aware that his sexual orientation would be unacceptable to his family and the larger community. To maintain his image, he married Jessica, projecting the illusion of a happy, heterosexual relationship. However, once they were married, his true nature emerged. Beneath the facade of a happily married 37-year-old pharmacy owner lay a deceitful, promiscuous, and abusive man who was living a lie. Throughout their marriage, Jessica unearthed Mitesh's clandestine engagements on the homosexual dating platform Grindr and directly addressed the issue. She had intercepted his conversations with other men and was cognizant of his unfaithfulness within their union. Mitesh deliberately underwent treatment to diminish his sperm count. This deliberate action aimed to reduce the likelihood of impregnating Jessica during their intimate encounters. By diminishing his sperm count, Mitesh actively sought to avert conception and pursue his hidden agenda of abstaining from parenthood with Jessica. Despite Jessica's aspirations of surmounting their challenges, including their unsuccessful endeavors at conceiving through IVF and re-establishing stability and joy in their relationship, the exposure of Mitesh's homosexuality and intentions to relocate to Australia with another individual ultimately shattered any lingering hopes of a contented future together. Moreover, Mitesh exhibited a recurring pattern of abusive conduct towards Jessica. Various individuals, including pharmacy employees, frequently witnessed Mitesh displaying hostile outbursts aimed at Jessica, even in the presence of customers and colleagues. These episodes often left Jessica visibly distraught as Mitesh would forcefully shut doors, hurl objects, and kick the base of the island in the dispensary. In terms of physical mistreatment, employees also noted Jessica's impaired mobility, with Jessica disclosing to them that she had sustained a bruise on her leg due to Mitesh throwing his mobile phone at her, resulting in the injury. Despite these adversities, Jessica remained steadfast in their marital relationship, potentially motivated by her affection for Mitesh and her yearning to establish a family. The trial of Jessica Patel commenced on November 13, 2018, at Teesside Crown Court, where the prosecution put forth a case characterized by its unsettling intricacies. They unveiled that Mitesh had engaged in extramarital relationships with other men, leading a dual existence, one portraying him as a devoted spouse and esteemed pharmacist, and the other concealing his true identity as a homosexual individual plotting to embark on a fresh journey with his boyfriend in Australia. Additionally, the prosecution disclosed Mitesh's intention to utilize Jessica's cryopreserved embryos to conceive a child with his partner, Dr. Amit Patel. Mitesh had fostered a romantic bond with Dr. Amit and strategized a relocation to Australia alongside him, intending to utilize the insurance payout from Jessica's demise, valued at nearly £2 million, to finance their new chapter. The prosecution contended that Mitesh had meticulously orchestrated Jessica's murder over an extended period, delving into internet research on methods of perpetrating the act. The defense maintained Mitesh's innocence, arguing that the evidence against him was based on circumstances and lacked direct proof of his involvement in the crime. They contended that an unidentified perpetrator was responsible and that Mitesh was being falsely incriminated. Following a 3-week trial, on December 4, 2018, the jury delivered their verdict. Mitesh Patel was convicted of murdering his wife, Jessica Patel. Justice James Goss, the presiding judge, imposed a life sentence with a minimum term of 30 years. During sentencing, Justice Goss remarked, "You have no remorse for your actions. Any pity you have is for yourself." He also noted, "You were an accomplished liar and continued to lie, including in your evidence to the jury." The community was stunned by the verdict, with many acquaintances of Mitesh and Jessica struggling to come to terms with the revelation of Mitesh's deceitful facade and the chilling act of violence he committed against Jessica, whom they had viewed as a harmonious couple. Jessica's family experienced profound devastation as they mourned the loss of a cherished daughter and sister. The individual they had welcomed into their family circle, believing in his trustworthiness, had shattered that trust in a profoundly shocking manner. In their statement, they expressed, "Jessica was our life. She had a bright future ahead of her. She was taken away from us in the cruelest of ways." Jessica's premature passing left an irreplaceable void in the hearts of her loved ones, acquaintances, and the wider community. Their anguish and mourning stand as a poignant tribute to the vibrant and empathetic life that was abruptly extinguished. Following this tragedy, the residents of Middlesbrough rallied together to pay homage to Jessica's legacy, extending unwavering support and unity to her mourning kin. Their resilience and solidarity amidst such adversity underscore the potency of communal empathy and fortitude. The narrative encompassing Jessica and Mitesh Patel serves as a stark reminder of the concealed perils that may lurk within relationships, underscoring the essentiality of vigilance and aid for those enduring silent struggles. May Jessica's memory kindle within us a resolve to treasure our dear ones, to seek assistance when necessary, and to advocate for a world where all can exist devoid of fear and harm. This is a still image from the footage recorded by Els Van Doren's helmet camera during her skydiving venture, just moments preceding her tragic demise. Despite being a highly skilled and experienced skydiver with numerous successful jumps, this particular instance led to an unfortunate end that nobody expected, with both her main and backup parachutes malfunctioning. Initially deemed an accident, a lingering suspicion persisted, prompting a more thorough investigation that shed light to the dark secrets in Van Doren's life and uncovered a shocking revelation. This was not any other skydiving venture that had gone wrong. This was actually a murder case and was dubbed by the media as the parachute murder. This is the twisted case of Els Van Doren. Els Van Doren was a 38-year-old Belgian woman married to an Antwerp jeweler named Jan de Wilde, and together they had 2 children, Vincent de Wilde and Carol de Wilde. While she worked in the family's jewelry store, Van Doren's true passion lay in skydiving. Initially taking up the sport with her husband in 1994, Van Doren surpassed his interest as her enthusiasm grew. With 2,300 jumps under her belt, she was an experienced skydiver. Every weekend and on bank holidays, she devoted her time to skydiving. In 1998, she delved into formation jumping and, by 2001, became a member of an all-female skydiving team who called themselves the Divas. The team even competed in the World Skydiving Championships in 2003, but unfortunately, Van Doren had to exit the group in 2004 due to health issues stemming from a hernia. After her recovery, Van Doren opted to skydive for enjoyment instead of competing. She became a member of the Svartberg Parachute Club, and by 2006, her tally of successful jumps, as mentioned earlier, had surpassed 2,300. It was within this club that she formed a close friendship with a fellow skydiver, 26-year-old schoolteacher Els Klottermans. Given their shared first name, Van Doren would later suggest the nickname Babs for her younger friend to minimize any potential confusion within the skydiving club they both attended. A certain gentleman by the name Marcel Summers also belonged to the same club and was acquainted with both women. The trio not only developed a strong friendship, but also became diving partners during their skydiving ventures. With time, Van Doren found herself developing a stronger bond with Marcel, even though she was a married woman. Their initially platonic relationship gradually evolved into a romantic entanglement. Her family was used to her spending weekends away at the skydiving club, and this unknowingly provided a convenient cover, which prevented her husband from growing suspicious about her relationship with Marcel. They often frequented Marcel's apartment, spending their weekends together without any worry. Little did Van Doren realize that she and Babs were not just sharing a first name, but also the same man. Unbeknownst to both women, Marcel had been secretly involved with both of them intimately. To manage both affairs, Marcel devised a schedule, allocating specific days for each woman. Fridays were dedicated to spending time with Babs, while Saturdays were reserved for Van Doren. This arrangement proved advantageous for Marcel for some period, however it would be short-lived when an unexpected twist awaited them, one particular weekend. On the evening of Friday, November 10, 2006, Babs arrived at Marcel's residence as per their regular weekly arrangement. Unbeknownst to her, Els Van Doren had decided to surprise Marcel by showing up unexpectedly that same night. Babs and Marcel had been dining together at the time, and upon returning to Marcel's apartment, they were met with Van Doren, who was waiting outside his door. The subsequent conversation that took place was unknown, but what was known for sure is that that night, it was not Babs who shared Marcel's bed. Instead, she found herself relegated to sleeping in a sleeping bag on the living room floor, while Van Doren and Marcel took the next phase to the bedroom. There in the living room, Babs noticed Van Doren's parachute and other skydiving gear in close proximity. Feeling wounded and betrayed after being deceived and replaced by her friend, Babs succumbed to an unthinkable action, one that would culminate in a tragic outcome later on. On November 18, 2006, 12 members of the skydiving club, including Van Doren, Babs, and Marcel, embarked on a flight over Flanders. The plan involved Van Doren, Babs, Marcel, and another skydiver named Tom executing a 4-person formation jump at 13,000 feet. In this formation, they would interlock hands before releasing and deploying their parachutes. As they readied for the jump, Els, Marcel, and Tom leaped from the plane as intended. However, it seemed that Babs, perhaps due to a delay or intentionally, jumped slightly later than the others. During the free fall, Babs was not able to catch up with the group, and therefore, at 9,000 feet, Marcel, Van Doren, and Tom broke the formation, preparing to safely open their parachutes. At this juncture, it became evident that a serious issue had arisen. As Van Doren attempted to engage her parachute by pulling the cords, it refused to open. Striving to remain composed, she recollected the emergency procedures during her training, and having encountered a failed parachute once before, she had successfully deployed the reserve parachute on that occasion. However, in this instance, hurtling through freefall at approximately 200 kilometers per hour, she had a mere 20 seconds or less to execute a life-saving maneuver for a successful landing. Despite her efforts, pulling the reserve cord proved futile, and the parachute remained unresponsive. With her desperation escalating, she persisted in tugging at both the main parachute and reserve cords, yet no response ensued. Marcel, who was 800 meters above, observed Van Doren, who was a mere 500 meters from the ground, and sensed that something was wrong, as her parachute had still not been deployed, but he could do nothing but just witness the unfolding horror. In a final, desperate attempt, Van Doren tried to untangle the cords of her parachute, hoping to activate it, but her fate had already been sealed. Meanwhile, on the ground, in the town of Opglabeek, as these events occurred, a woman was outside hanging laundry in her garden. A resounding thud made her grow alarmed at what had happened. Glancing upward, she witnessed an individual descending from the sky with a parachute towards her garden. This spectacle wasn't unfamiliar, given that her residence was merely a few kilometers from the skydiving club and its landing field. While turning to resume her laundry task, the woman spotted a white fabric entangled on top of her shrubs. Drawing closer, she saw a person lying amidst the bushes. Swiftly, she called her husband, who was also in the garden attending to maintenance duties, and they promptly contacted emergency services. That person was Els Van Doren, who they assumed was one of the skydivers, but unfortunately did not display any signs of life. On the other hand, Marcel secured a safe landing spot and sprinted through the streets, frantically calling out for Van Doren and trying to pinpoint her location. Spotting an ambulance, Marcel gave chase, following it to the nearby site where Van Doren had descended. As he rushed towards her, he had to be restrained, allowing the emergency crew to approach. Upon the arrival of emergency services, resuscitation efforts were initiated, but proved futile. Els Van Doren had succumbed. Marcel vehemently insisted on preserving Van Doren's parachute untouched, asserting the abnormality of both the main and reserve parachutes failing to open. He then contacted her husband Jan and delivered the devastating news. Jan hurried to his wife's side, while Tom and Babs returned to the parachute club to relay the tragic news of Van Doren's demise to the other members. As the gravity of the news sank in for the club's members, Babs, overwhelmed, sank to her knees, releasing a mournful wail. Elle's husband, Jan, arrived at the club to gather her belongings, encountering Babs, who volunteered to retrieve the items. He observed her seemingly motionless and noted a peculiar grin on her face at that moment. Babs proceeded towards the changing rooms, with Jan trailing closely. However, upon arrival, Babs abruptly shut the door, locking Jan out. He recounted that Babs took a considerable amount of time before eventually emerging with Van Doren's belongings. Meanwhile, at the accident site, the police had gathered Van Doren's parachute and helmet, the latter equipped with a video camera capturing her ill-fated jump. An autopsy, conducted to ascertain her state, revealed no traces of alcohol or drugs that might have impaired her functionality. Her demise was classified as either a homicide or a suicide, attributed to numerous fractures and internal bleeding resulting from the impact of the fall. Suspicions arose within Van Doren's family, pointing toward the possibility of her being murdered by someone within her skydiving club, an individual well-versed on how the parachute works. Consequently, the club members were discouraged from attending her funeral, a plea that some members, including Els Klottermans, disregarded. The family's anguish intensified when the police disclosed that Van Doren had been engaged in a prolonged extramarital affair with Marcel Summers, spanning over 5 years. Jan, in particular, felt deeply wounded, discovering that fellow club members were aware of the affair, some of whom he considered friends from his own club membership. To compound matters, Van Doren had falsely informed her club peers that she was separated from her husband. Her funeral took place a mere day before her daughter Carol's 15th birthday. During this solemn occasion, Carol addressed her mother through a heartfelt statement, recounting the family's repeated pleas for her to cease skydiving. She conveyed the family's longing for her presence. She, however, concluded her remarks by acknowledging her mother's individuality and emphasizing that she would have been unhappy if she had to abandon what she loved to do. In response to the escalating concerns surrounding the failure of Van Doren's reserve parachute, the police initiated an investigation shortly after the funeral. A parachuting specialist, well-versed in parachute mechanics, was enlisted to scrutinize Van Doren's parachute, seeking to identify any irregularities. Swiftly, the expert discerned a critical absence, a vital component of her parachute, the pilot chute. This small auxiliary parachute usually plays a pivotal role in deploying either the main or reserve parachute. Its intentional removal was evident, signaling deliberate interference. Additionally, clear indications of tampering surfaced, notably the severed drawstring to the pilot chute, responsible for activating the main parachute, and one of the hanging straps connected to the emergency parachute. Upon reviewing the last bodycam footage from Van Doren's ill-fated jump, an unidentified red fabric appeared suspended in front of her face. Not recognized as part of Van Doren's skydiving gear, investigators struggled to find out the origin of this object. They requested and urged the residents of Opglabeek to do thorough checks of their gardens and nearby surroundings in a bid to uncover the red item, and if found, it was emphasized that the discovery be handled cautiously as potential evidence, as it possibly contained DNA from the individual who had sabotaged Van Doren's parachute, but unfortunately, no one succeeded in locating this crucial piece. On the Monday following Els Van Doren's tragic demise, a miraculous discovery came to light as the pilot chute was mysteriously found by Babs. She claimed that on returning from Marcel's apartment, she spotted the chute hanging from a tree during her journey between Opglabeek and Genk. Rather than contacting the police directly, Babs opted to inform Marcel of her find. Upon learning of the discovery, Marcel made the call to the police, who promptly proceeded to the tree site. Upon their arrival, the police encountered a nervous, troubled, and visibly emotional Babs. However, their suspicions were aroused regarding Klotterman's miraculous discovery of the pilot chute. She asserted that it was purely coincidental, attributing it to her decision to take a different route home that day compared to her usual journey. According to her account, being stuck behind a slow-moving tractor led her to glance upward, where she spotted the chute dangling around 20 meters above, interpreting it as a heavenly sign from Van Doren. Police, however, remained skeptical, as the fact that the pilot chute was missing was known only to the investigators at that point. At this point, the primary suspects implicated in the presumed murder of Van Doren included her husband, Jan, her lover, Marcel, and her friend, Els Klottermans. Police conducted searches at Marcel's residence and would later clear him as a suspect. Jan, Van Doren's husband, was also later cleared as a suspect by the authorities. Investigative efforts extended to Els Klotterman's home, where items such as her phone, laptop, and a diary documenting her emotions, as per her psychiatrist's recommendation, were confiscated by the police. Babs was subsequently summoned for questioning at the police station, aiming to obtain further information about her relationships with Marcel, Van Doren, and the events surrounding Van Doren's demise. Throughout the interrogation, Klottermans vehemently denied any involvement in sabotaging Van Doren's parachute. Instead, she attempted to shift blame onto either Marcel, suggesting he kept Van Doren's gear during her weekend stays, or her husband Jan, with whom she purportedly stored her gear during the week. Following the initial questioning, Klottermans was released and allowed to return home. However, a second interview scheduled for December 20th, 2006, saw her absence. Subsequent investigations revealed that she had attempted taking her own life earlier that morning, having taken an overdose combination of sleeping pills and antidepressants. Discovered unresponsive by her mother, Babs was swiftly taken to hospital for urgent treatment. In letters addressed to her loved ones before the act, she conveyed the difficulty of coping with the loss of her close friend and expressed the overwhelming stress of being implicated as a murder suspect in the case. After recuperating, Babs was admitted to a psychiatric facility where she was carefully monitored for a duration of 15 days. Having been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and depression years earlier, this marked not her first attempt at self-harm. Marcel had chose to sever ties with her, contending that he perceived her actions as an attention-seeking ploy, asserting that she had no genuine intent to end her life. Marcel speculated that she strategically took the pills shortly before anticipating her mother's return, suggesting her primary motive was to divert attention from her alleged involvement in Van Doren's death. He presumed that the police were closing in on her, ensnaring her in her own lies. Shortly thereafter, still receiving psychiatric care, Els Klottermans found herself under arrest on January 11, 2007, suspected of the murder of Els Van Doren. Her appearance in court on January 19, 2007, resulted in the decision to keep her in custody while the ongoing investigation unfolded. Despite being asked to undergo a polygraph test, Klottermans declined, and this measure was never carried out. A more detailed investigation of Els Van Doren's skydiving equipment revealed that the parachute cords had been deliberately cut using a pair of scissors, and the individual responsible for this act was likely a right-handed person. As of March 2007, Babs had spent 3 months in prison, enduring extensive interrogation without admitting guilt. During the questioning, she did concede to being the sender of an anonymous letter addressed to Van Doren, asserting that her actions towards her family were wrong. Jan had discovered this letter, but interpreted it as a critique of Van Doren's frequent absence from her family due to skydiving. He discarded the letter without attaching much significance to it. However, it became evident that Babs intended this as a warning for Van Doren to bring an end to her involvement with Marcel. Additionally, she admitted to making anonymous calls to Marcel, intentionally timed when she knew he was with Van Doren, and tried to intimidate them. Upon scrutinizing Babs's automatic activation device, or an AAD, investigators noted that she jumped later than the rest of the team and activated her parachute earlier, speculating that it gave her a vantage position to witness the unfolding events from above. This strategic move also allowed her to monitor the location where Van Doren's black pilot chute had landed, potentially for retrieval afterwards. In September 2008, Klotterman's lawyer successfully secured her release on bail, and despite the ongoing investigation, she resumed to work in a school. The murder trial commenced on September 24, 2010, with the prosecution expressing confidence in the adequacy of the evidence to secure a murder charge against Klottermans. The motive presented was rooted in jealousy upon discovering that her lover was engaged in a relationship with her close friend. In a previous statement to investigators, Klottermans had admitted to being aware that she held a subordinate position to Van Doren in the eyes of Marcel Summers, acknowledging that she was the second best since Summers clearly preferred Van Doren over her. Consequently, driven by a desperate desire to eliminate her romantic rival and remove Van Doren from the equation, the prosecution asserted a compelling motive for the alleged murder. Klotterman's defense attorney contended that the prosecution relied solely on circumstantial evidence and alleged accusations to support their case. During her testimony, Klottermans asserted that she did not envision a future with Marcel and engaged intimately with him solely due to her low self-esteem. At one point, she even attempted to shift blame towards Carol, Van Doren's daughter, suggesting that she might have sought to retaliate against her mother for being away most of the weekends. However, despite her earnest efforts to manipulate the jury and divert blame, their judgment prevailed. On October 20, 2010, Els Klottermans was found guilty of murdering her friend Els Van Doren and received a 30-year prison sentence. During the trial, Babs, steadfast in her assertion of innocence, was placed under close observation to prevent her from self-harming again. Later on, she lodged an appeal, contending that police had questioned her in the absence of her attorney. In May 2011, her appeal was rejected. However, in June 2022, following a third appeal, and after serving only 12.5 years, Els Klottermans was granted conditional release from prison and is now a free woman. It is unfortunate what happened to Els van Doren, and also sad what her family had to go through after everything came to light. Our deepest sympathies go out to the life that was lost and the grieving loved ones she left behind. December 26, 1997, during the early morning hours in East Bremerton, Washington, a neighbor notices smoke coming from the Hatchney residence and alerts the other neighbors. It doesn't take too long before a 911 call is made and authorities rush their way to the scene. Authorities arrived and got the fire under control, only to then make a grueling discovery, which was accompanied by a smell of burning flesh that made them fear the worst. Inside, they unfortunately find the body of a 28-year-old woman who neighbors immediately recognize as that of Dawn Hatchney. Her husband, Nick Hatchney, had gone for a hunting trip with friends, and at around 10 a.m., he came back home with their dog only to find the house had been on fire and his wife had died as a result of it. Initially ruled as an accidental fire, a gruesome discovery would be made years later and would reveal that something far more sinister was behind it. This is the heartbreaking case of Dawn Hatchney. Dawn Marie Tienhara was born on December 5, 1969, in Seattle, Washington, to Donald Tienhara and Diana Parmel. Donald worked in a shipyard while Diana took care of the home. Dawn was their eldest child and only daughter, and together grew up with her 3 brothers, Dennis, Darren, and Derek, in Bremerton, Washington. According to her mother, her devoutness began at an early age, with her embracing faith and accepting the Lord into her life when she was 4 years old. Dawn faced hardships in her childhood due to her parents' struggles with anxiety and depression that would often lead to frequent conflicts. Around 1980, Diana met a new man, prompting her departure from the family to move in with him. This led to the arrival of another baby. However, the relationship hit a snag, forcing Diana, alongside her newborn, to return to Donald and her other children. Despite these childhood obstacles she faced, Dawn turned all her challenges into doing well in school, dedicating herself to achieving excellent grades. At just 12 years old, she had participated in the Scripps National Spelling Bee, an opportunity that not only led her to the White House, but also allowed her to meet the late former president, Ronald Reagan. In 1988, Dawn graduated and achieved the honor of being the valedictorian at Bremerton Christian School before joining the Northwest College of the Assemblies of God in Seattle. During her college years, she crossed paths with Nick Hatchney, and an instant connection sparked between them. However, concerns arose among Dawn's friends when she referred to Nick as the one after just a few dates. They hoped their friend would find a companion who embraced her with unwavering support and genuine affection, expressing apprehension about Nick as they perceived Nick as excessively assertive and overly self-assured, not aligning with Dawn's personality. Nick's upbringing paralleled Dawn's in some ways. He was born and raised in Washington, but unlike her, he hailed from Poulsbo, a coastal city in Washington. Nick also faced troubles within his family from a young age. His father, Dan, immersed in constant work as a mechanic, remained distant when home, neglecting family time and household responsibilities. Meanwhile, Sandra, his mother, juggled a home daycare and foster care, leaving Nick feeling neglected. He confided in friends, expressing a sense of being less favored than his siblings and even the foster kids, perceiving his mother's feelings toward him as hate. Struggling through his mother's prolonged bouts of depression and his emotionally distant father, Nick lacked emotional support or connection from his parents. Despite this isolation, Nick sought comfort in the Bible, finding solace and deepening his involvement in Christianity. While his faith bolstered his self-assurance during his adolescence, it occasionally distanced him from others due to his newfound confidence. Nick and Dawn crossed paths for the first time at their shared college. Dawn's friends found it strange that she would take an interest in Nick, given his opposite traits as mentioned earlier. With time, they began noticing a change in Dawn. She had always displayed confidence through her extrovert nature, was always self-sufficient, consistently driven and striving to conquer new goals. However, in Nick's presence, everything seemed to be the other way around. She became timid, withdrawn, and indecisive, frequently deferring to Nick's choices, even if they clashed with her preferences or made her uncomfortable. It appeared as though Nick had a negative influence on her, contrary to bringing out her best self. Despite this, their love endured, and their relationship persisted, eventually ending up in an engagement after Nick proposed on Alki Beach in 1990. They sealed their commitment with marriage on April 20th, 1991, subsequently moving back to Bremerton. At that point, both had completed their degrees. Dawn secured a position as a loan officer, while Nick embarked on his role as a youth pastor at Christ Community Church on Bainbridge Island, situated across the bay from Seattle. Nick had aspired to become a youth pastor, specifically targeting Christ Community Church due to his bond with his former youth pastor Bob, also known as P.B. Smith. At that time, P.B. Smith remained with the church, having overseen its affairs since the late 1980s, but had now partnered with Pastor Robert Billy Craig in guiding the congregation. P.B. Smith adopted a more amiable, yet conservative approach to church leadership, whereas Pastor Robert was known for his stringent and radical teachings. Throughout their marriage, Nick consistently made decisions without any opposition from Dawn. Why was that the case, though? Well, both Nick and Dawn adhered to Christian fundamentalism, a community where the wife is expected to submit to her husband's authority, believing it aligns with God's plan. At Christ Community Church, this ideology was explicitly promoted and deemed acceptable. The church even practiced exorcisms on afflicted members, advocated for families to have as many children as deemed by God, and endorsed homeschooling for these children. Their teachings emphasized women's modesty and addressed uncomfortable inquiries about sex. Speaking out against these norms risked excommunication from the church, fostering a climate of silence among dissenters, driven by fear of expulsion. Dawn and the congregation found themselves entrenched in what many would label a cult, with her husband Nick playing a pivotal role in the perilous practices. Nick had shifted his admiration toward Robert and sought direct mentorship under him, steering away from his initial close relationship with P.B. Smith. Dissatisfied with Smith's more relaxed approach, Nick felt he wasn't learning enough and disapproved of what he perceived as leniency, favoring the stringent and extreme methods of Pastor Robert. On the other hand, Robert viewed Nick as a means to accomplish his agenda, ousting Smith and assuming complete control as the senior pastor of the church. By 1997, Dawn and Nick had encountered home-related issues as they frequently relocated, residing in properties they refurbished to sell. Dawn yearned to establish a family and settle into a permanent residence. To address this, Nick found a fixer-upper in East Bremerton, intending for them to move in, renovate, and make it their home. However, the home purchase, renovations, and their house-flipping venture had pushed the couple into debt. Although their outward appearance showcased a seemingly flawless relationship, with Dawn portrayed as the supportive wife accommodating Nick's desires, underlying issues existed far beyond anyone's perception. Dawn had even made a request jokingly to a friend about potentially living with her instead of returning to her parents in case she and Nick ended their relationship. Meanwhile, Nick continued accumulating debt by regularly loaning money to fellow church members. He embarked on his ambitious venture, establishing a Christian youth camp. This endeavor, predictably, proved to be financially burdensome. However, fueled by his fervent desire, he fully committed to the project. He even began scouting properties in Jefferson County, convinced that one of these would serve as the perfect location for the camp. His determination intensified when a congregant, a woman named Sandy Glass, asserted receiving a divine vision, affirming that the property Nick had his eye on was destined to become the site of the youth camp he envisioned. Sandy Glass, who was in her 20s, had already faced considerable hardships in her life. Her first boyfriend had passed away due to an unspecified illness, while her father succumbed to a construction accident. Additionally, her brother battled with addiction. Sandy was married to a man named Jimmy. Their financial situation had been strained for some time. They relied solely on Jimmy's income as a carpenter, with Sandy staying home to care for their children. Similar to Nick, Sandy struggled with reckless spending habits, often exceeding their means, resulting in frequent arguments between her and Jimmy. These disputes sometimes led Jimmy to express his frustration through yelling or by withdrawing himself from the situation and spending hours at the bar. In a bid to address their marital conflicts, the couple sought help from the church and began attending marriage counseling sessions which were facilitated by Nick. At this point, Nick had served as the church's marriage counselor for several years. Many congregants had lodged complaints with Robert about Nick's counseling style, expressing discomfort over his tendency to focus predominantly on intimate inquiries, often dismissing other crucial issues. It appeared that discussions primarily revolved around matters of a sexual nature, neglecting other significant aspects. However, owing to the trust they had in P.B. Smith, who was still affiliated with the church, members presumed that Nick's role wouldn't be entrusted if he wasn't credible. However, by the fall of 1997, Pastor Robert had successfully displaced Smith, assuming the role of senior pastor, a decision fully endorsed by the church board. Smith and his wife then departed for Africa to engage in missionary work. Jimmy's parents, who were church attendees themselves, had viewed Sandy and Jimmy seeking church intervention as a hasty decision. They even questioned Nick's qualifications and experience in guiding their son's marriage. Their concerns deepened when Nick exhibited a conspicuous focus on Sandy individually rather than on the couple as a unit. This heightened attention extended beyond counseling sessions, leading to prolonged phone conversations and an excessive amount of time spent together both at church and even outside the church's surroundings. Jimmy's parents deemed the dynamic between Nick and Sandy as inappropriate, noting their extended interactions and increased closeness, which seemed to surpass the boundaries of a typical counselor-client relationship. Pastor Robert's wife, Pamela, had taken notice of Nick's conduct and had a private conversation with him, expressing concerns about his inappropriate behavior and advising him to focus on his own marriage. Following numerous complaints, Robert intervened, cautioning Sandy that her relationship with Nick was unacceptable and needed to cease. Sandy, feeling a sense of divine connection between her and Nick, reacted angrily to Robert's counsel. She wrote him a letter expressing her discontent, stating, "The judgment I feel from you makes it hard for me to believe that you accept my gifts at all, or that you have any confidence in my ability to hear God and use this to help anyone." The relationship between Sandy and Nick was already negatively impacting those around them. Don and Jimmy, along with his children from his marriage to Sandy, felt hurt. In fact, one of their children confided in Jimmy, revealing that Nick and Sandy had mentioned Nick becoming their new father when Jimmy died. At church, Dawn started sharing her distress with friends, revealing her financial turmoil and her earnest desire to have children, a wish Nick vehemently opposed. As 1997 drew to a close, Nick engaged in relationships with multiple women besides Sandy. He was seen engaging in private conversations and prolonged phone calls with these women. Simultaneously, Sandy's purported visions intensified, urging Nick to prioritize the establishment of his youth camp and to allocate more time to their relationship, as she believed they were destined to be together. Dawn, on the contrary, made numerous efforts to rekindle Nick's happiness with her, even going to the lengths of attempting to lose some weight. Certain women within the congregation endeavored to console her, affirming that the issues between her and Nick were not a result of her actions, but rather stemmed from Nick himself being the core problem. Regrettably, her life hadn't unfolded as she had envisioned when she entered into marriage with him. Fast forward to Christmas, Dawn woke up feeling under the weather. Despite being sick with a cold, she and Nick visited her family, spending the whole day together. Later, in the evening, they headed to P.B. Smith's residence, joining his family for some time. Plans were set for Nick to go hunting with Lindsay, Smith's daughter, and her friends the following morning. On the 26th, just before dawn, Nick met up with his companions at Hood Canal Bridge in Jefferson County for the hunting trip. After spending a few hours in the woods without firing a single shot, they decided to leave and headed to a local diner for breakfast around 9 a.m. While everyone was eating, Nick suddenly stood up, appearing concerned, and exclaimed, "Dawn and I haven't opened our Christmas presents." Around 9:30 a.m., Nick departed from the diner and returned home by 10 a.m., only to discover the tragic news of his wife's demise in a fire. Investigators revealed that the fire initially remained contained in the bedroom, sparked by a malfunctioning space heater. The inferno rapidly escalated due to the presence of newspapers and wrapping paper within the room, worsened by the multiple propane containers on the floor. Strangely, despite Nick informing his friends at the diner less than an hour earlier that they hadn't yet opened their Christmas gifts, he informed the authorities that they had indeed opened presents the previous night. He explained that due to Dawn feeling unwell, she retired to bed without tidying up the wrapping paper. Additionally, Nick claimed to have received the propane tanks as a Christmas gift. The couple's ongoing home renovations had led them to rely on space heaters during the winter. Back then, such heaters lacked the safety features seen in modern versions, which resulted in frequent fires and fatalities. Police found no discrepancies in Nick's account. Being a local pastor as well, Nick's standing in the community left law enforcement with no reason to suspect anything other than an accidental death for his wife. Concerned for their pastor's well-being, Nick's congregation sought ways to support him during what they believed was an immensely challenging time. Pastor Robert even proposed attempting to resurrect Dawn through prayer, but Nick declined, citing his wish to spare her any potential pain. This refusal surprised Robert, given Nick's prior willingness to engage in church activities, including the exorcisms they had previously attempted. Mary Glass, Sandra's mother-in-law, harbored immediate suspicions about Nick's involvement in Dawn's death, convinced it wasn't accidental. She urged her husband to approach the police, but this never materialized. Within days, Dawn's death was officially labeled accidental, and the Bremerton police relinquished the case to Nick's insurance company. Nick had already submitted a request to process Dawn's life insurance policy. Family and friends found it peculiar that Nick was dealing with the life insurance so swiftly after Dawn's passing. However, considering the couple's substantial debt and Nick's aspirations for the youth camp, they rationalized his urgency for the money. Some church members found Nick's grieving methods rather unusual, but they refrained from expressing concerns, assuming that everyone copes differently with grief. The church community organized a celebration of life event, serving as Dawn's funeral, where family and friends gathered to share stories and commemorate her life amid their sorrow. Nick remained entirely composed throughout the funeral, and even delivered a 45-minute eulogy. Friends assisting in tidying his home stumbled upon photos of Dawn tucked away at the back of a closet, which seemed as if he wanted to discard them. Subsequently, Nick displayed a harsh and insensitive attitude, not just towards some church members, but also to neighbors and friends. Beyond maintaining multiple relationships with women from the congregation, Nick shockingly engaged in an intimate relationship with Diana, Dawn's own mother, under the pretense of mourning as a widower. Nick's behavior had become intolerable even for Pastor Robert, resulting in Nick being asked to depart from Christ Community Church. This expulsion proved to be a significant blow to Nick, marking the outset of his escalating troubles. On April 10, 2001, Sandy, accompanied by her lawyer, met with the county district attorney and received an immunity offer in exchange for her testimony regarding a long-held secret dating back to the morning of December 26, 1997. According to Sandy, on the morning of Dawn's demise, Nick allegedly contacted her and confessed, saying, "I did it." However, their conversation was abruptly interrupted by another incoming call on Sandy's phone. Putting Nick on hold to answer the call from somebody from the church who informed her about Dawn's incident, Sandy later returned to her conversation with Nick, seeking clarification on what he meant. But Nick only reiterated, "It's done, it's done." Sandy refrained from pressing for more details about the call for several weeks afterward. Eventually, when Sandy confronted Nick, he confessed to administering a substantial overdose of Benadryl to Dawn and suffocating her by placing a plastic bag over her face. The heartbreaking aspect is that Dawn remained partially conscious, witnessing her husband suffocating her through the plastic bag. After ensuring she was no longer alive, he strategically arranged old newspapers and wrapping paper around the room, positioning them beneath her body, and positioned the propane tanks near the bed. He arranged the heater too in a way that it would start a fire, intending to obliterate any evidence of a crime, and instead staged the incident as an accidental fire. Dawn's autopsy findings indicated an absence of soot or carbon monoxide in her lungs and blood. The pathologist in charge of Dawn's examination attributed her death to an accidental fire and overlooked crucial evidence regarding carbon monoxide's adherence to red blood cells. This oversight led them to conclude, given Dawn was a pastor's wife, foul play wasn't involved, neglecting to convey that carbon monoxide attaches to red blood cells, implicating the absence of breathing during the incident. Despite an overdose of 5 times the normal amount of Benadryl, it was deemed insufficient to cause respiratory failure. The pathologist dismissed the possibility, suggesting Dawn, even in a drowsy state, would have reacted to the rising heat. Notably, crime scene photos revealed newspapers beneath Dawn's body, an unsettling detail that went largely unnoticed. While a fire marshal raised suspicions and conversed with the police, the ultimate decision regarding the accidental nature of Dawn's death didn't fall within his jurisdiction. Nick was arrested on September 12, 2001 at a Kinko's parking lot, where he staunchly denied any involvement in Dawn's death, attributing his arrest to the church's attempts at sabotage. Despite his assertions that the church members could inflict substantial harm, Nick faced first-degree murder charges with bail set at $750,000. Sandy's narrative, as conveyed to investigators, appeared bizarre, adding to the frustration stemming from the nearly 4-year delay in considering Nick as a suspect or making an arrest. Her reason for cooperating was equally exasperating, driven by anger over Nick's involvement with other women from the church and feeling exploited. According to Sandy, at that point she concluded that God disapproved of their relationship, consequently implying that Dawn's murder was against divine will as well. Church members, when questioned, recounted Nick's peculiar behaviors and inappropriate relationships, expressing dismay over his failure to even purchase a headstone for Dawn's grave following the life insurance payout. On September 17, 2001, Nick appeared before a judge and entered a plea of not guilty. He asserted that his church had cast a curse upon him, alleging that Pastor Robert possessed a malevolent influence far darker than comprehensible by the police. Nick's trial commenced, prompting a modification in the charges due to the prosecutor's doubts regarding the judge's inclination toward the death penalty, initially sought with the charge of first-degree murder. The charges were amended to aggravated first-degree murder, carrying a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The alteration in charges stemmed from the arson Nick had committed, enabling this revised charge. Witnesses, including the women who were involved with Nick and various church members who had undergone counseling with him, provided testimonies that illuminated Nick's conduct to the jury. These accounts shed light on the significant influence wielded by the church in their lives. They detailed experiences of purported visions and direct messages believed to be from God, exploited by Nick for rationalization and manipulation. Smith's daughter testified, recounting her introduction to Nick through her father and how Nick had groomed her during her teenage years. Their sexual involvement ensued shortly after Dawn's death and persisted until she eventually relocated about a year later. Doctors and forensic experts also testified, emphasizing that Dawn's body held vital clues regarding the events of that day. However, these indicators were overlooked, as mentioned earlier, due to Nick's status as a pastor, despite the abnormal absence of soot and carbon monoxide for someone who was alive and breathing during a fire. The defense vehemently contested these allegations, focusing efforts on framing Sandy as the jealous, vengeful ex-partner, fabricating accusations upon discovering Nick's infidelity with various women. Nonetheless, on December 26, 2002, 5 years post-Dawn's tragic demise, the jury deliberated for a mere day before delivering a guilty verdict for aggravated first-degree murder against Nick. During the subsequent sentencing on February 7, 2003, Nick addressed the courtroom, comprising Dawn's friends and family, vehemently maintaining his innocence while expressing remorse for his actions and expressing sorrow over their loss, acknowledging Dawn deserved better. Nick received a life sentence. However, in 2007, an appeal to the state Supreme Court led to a revision of his life sentence. The appeal contended that since Dawn had already perished due to Nick suffocating her, the original charge of aggravated first-degree murder, pertaining to death by arson, didn't align with her actual cause of death. The defense argued that Nick therefore didn't deserve a life sentence. Ultimately, the state Supreme Court ruled in favor of the appeal, altering Nick's sentence to 26 years in prison. While in prison, Nick has actively supported educational initiatives and co-founded the Environmental Advancement Reintegration Network. He initiated a waste management system, employing worm composting, and even delivered a TED Talk centered on sustainability. Unfortunately, it is indicated that he will become eligible for parole in 2025 and could potentially be released soon. Dawn, gone soon, but not forgotten. Unfortunately, the life she had pictured with whom she believed was the one didn't turn out to be the actual reality, and sadly in the process led to the ultimate betrayal and her heartbreaking and untimely demise. Our heartfelt prayers and thoughts extend to her departed soul and the loved ones she left behind.